BB4OD and straight black pride, brothers and sisters. This is your brother, DC Radical 1, with another radical report. And today we will discuss Ghana. Ghana's parliament passes a strong anti-LGBTQ bill, strengthening the resistance to homophilia on the African continent. So let us start here with what we're gonna do is going to examine the process of how we got to this point. And as we have here, this is from February 22nd, 2024. This is the East African. Ghana moves closer to passing bill that would crack down on so-called LGBTQ rights. It says Ghana's parliament on Wednesday moved a step closer to holding a vote on a bill that seeks to further clamp down against LGBT, rejecting a proposal that would have seen jail terms for same-gender intimacy replaced with non-custodial sentences such as counseling. A coalition of Christian, Muslim, and Ghanaian traditional leaders have sponsored the legislation, which is favored by most lawmakers. It would punish the promotion of LGBT for those who are gay, lesbian, or non-conventional sexual or gender identities with up to 10 years in prison. Homosexuality is already punishable in the country for up to 3 years in prison, and that would rise to 5 years under this bill. Ruling party lawmaker Alexander Afinio Markin withdrew his proposed amendment after it was rejected on Wednesday. He argued that imprisoning people for LGBT offenses would worsen homosexuality and its promotion, which he said would defeat the bill's original intent. I'm not sure how he came to that conclusion. I would love to see what his reasoning is on that. The bill, one of the harshest of its kind in Africa, according to these people, will now be fine-tuned for a vote in Parliament. If approved, it will require presidential assent to come into force. So that was on February 22nd. And then we're going to move up and see our next article is from Al Jazeera. And this article states, Ghana's parliament passes anti-LGBTQ bill. So-called rights activists condemn the law that would punish LGBTQ people as well as those who promote LGBT to prison, which is very interesting because one thing we've seen, and I've talked about this previously, is that the money to promote LGBTQ, the funding is actually not coming from Ghanaians themselves or even any other African country. Most of the times, the promotion and the organization for these different groups and movements are from Western imperial powers and NGOs who are funding and promoting this activity on the African continent. Now let us read. It says Ghana's parliament has voted to pass a allegedly controversial bill to severely restrict LGBTQ in a move that was condemned by people who are pro-LGBTQ. But of course, if you're pro-LGBTQ, of course you're going to be mad. That's like saying people who rob banks are frustrated by laws passed to stop people from robbing banks. But let's move forward. A coalition of religious and traditional leaders sponsored the legislation and is favored by most lawmakers and passed Parliament on Wednesday. The bill would punish those who take part in LGBTQ activities, intimate activities, as well as those who promote those activities with time in prison. The bill, allegedly one of the harshest of its kind in Africa, still has to be validated by the president before entering into law, which observers believe is unlikely before a general election in December. So-called activist groups have called the Human Sexual Rights and Family Values Bill a setback for human rights and urged President Nana Akufo-Addo government to reject it. Now, we have spoken previously, the whole human rights paradigm only means LGBT. It doesn't have anything to do with anything else. It was a term made up by LGBT to push LGBT. That's all it is. So it has nothing to do with human rights whatsoever. But the legislation is widely supported in Ghana, where Akufo-Addo has said gay marriage will never be allowed while he's in power. Commonly referred to as the anti-gay bill, it received sponsorship from a coalition comprising Christian, Muslim, and Ghanaian traditional leaders, finding substantial backing among the members of parliament. Intimacy between the same gender is already illegal in West Africa and is frowned upon in most of Africa, the notable exception of Azania. But while so-called discrimination against LGBT is common, no one has ever been prosecuted under the so-called colonial era law. Now I'm trying to figure out if it's a colonial era law. One thing we have to understand is that before the Europeans, we didn't have to write laws to tell people to not to do things that were against the culture, because no one was ever doing that. But I digress. Under the provisions of the bill, those who take place in LGBTQ intimate acts could face imprisonment from 6 months to 3 years. The bill also imposes a prison sentence of 3 to 5 years for willful promotion, sponsorship, or support of LGBTQ. It says, now they have someone here who says you can't criminalize a person's identity, that's false. Black people's identity has been criminalized for the first 100 years of America, so that's just a lie. You actually can, and it has been done. And then it says we want to impress upon the president not to assent the bill because it violates human rights, which just means it's just anti-gay. So basically, here the rest of this article is just pro-LGBT, is asking a bunch of LGBT people their opinion, and of course their opinion is going to be that they're against the bill. So I just find it interesting that Al Jazeera, which is a news service that is over in the Middle East where they're completely anti-LGBT, would come down so harshly and be so slanted against the bill. So obviously there's somebody behind Al Jazeera paying money that I don't know about. I just found that article interesting in the way it was written. So with that, we're going to move forward and look at Reuters. And it says here, Ghana's president says anti-LGBTQ bill has not reached his desk. Well, this ought to be interesting. It says from Accra, Ghana, an anti-LGBTQ bill passed by Ghana's parliament last week, which could derail international aid for the West African country if it becomes law, according to an internal government memo, has not yet reached the desk of President Nana Akufo-Addo, he said on Monday. In his first comments on the bill's passage, he said Ghana will not backslide on its human rights issues, and added that the bill has been challenged in the Supreme Court. It says, I have learned that today a challenge has been mounted at the Supreme Court, Akufo-Addo said in a statement. In the circumstances, it would be as well for all of us to hold our hands and await the decision of the court before any action is taken. The bill could lead to a loss of $3.8 billion in World Bank financing over the next 5 to 6 years if it becomes law, derailing a $3 billion IMF loan, the finance ministry said in a document seen by Reuters today. Now let's stop right here. First of all, why is Ghana dependent upon the World Bank and the IMF in taking loans out from corrupt organizations that are known to hinder the progress of the nations that they give loans to. Why is Mr. Atto and his government allowing themselves to be exploited by these organizations? Again, for those of us who are familiar with the Diary of an Economic Hitman, understand that the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank are, in essence, criminal cartels who keep so-called developing countries from actually developing any independence for themselves. But let's read the rest of the article. Akufo-Addo would need to sign the bill in order for it to become law. Lawmakers on February 28th unanimously passed the legislation that will intensify a crackdown on the rights of LGBTQ people and those promoting those laws. Finance Ministry document dated March said it summarized deliberations between the finance minister, the central bank governor, head of the tax authority, and other senior officials, contained recommendations for the president. So, what we see here is that the West is going to use these non-governmental entities to try to promote LGBTQ in Africa and to punish an African country and to make a move against this African country's sovereignty. Now, many people have accused Mr. Atto of being a slave for the West and having no backbone and being a coward for refusing to stand up to Western interests. This will be a strong test of Mr. Atto's presidency, because what we're going to see here is that the people are definitely in favor of this bill. And if Mr. Atto fails to pass the bill when it's been passed by the legislative body, it will be interesting to see what takes place. From my understanding, Ghana has an election, a national election coming up towards the end of this year. And experts say that it's highly possible that Atto will try to hold off on actually voting to make the bill law until after the election, which means he could also vote against the law after the election. So, brothers and sisters, it will be interesting to see what takes place here, what move Atto makes, and also what move the West makes to try to sway the Ghanaian government to allow the imposition of LGBTQ into their country. We will keep an eye on this situation in Ghana. I know that there are many brothers and sisters from America who have who either have or are thinking about traveling to or immigrating to Ghana, and I know you all would like to know whether or not what position the Ghanaian government will take in this situation. So with that, brothers and sisters, I thank you all for listening. I thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. This is your brother DC Radical 1. With that, I say Habibi Fodie and straight black pride. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also follow us on our other social media platforms. On Instagram, we're at dc.radical, the number 1. On Twitter, we're at DC_radical_ONE. And the Cashapp is $DC Radical 1. Again, thank you for subscribing. Habibi Fodie and straight black pride.